This is a man who presided over an extremely brutal torture execution of Sambhaji, of Sikh gurus and things like that. The Hindu sources, the Maratha sources, the Sikh sources all seem to agree on this one man, that he wasn't a pleasant chap. He wasn't a kind person. Dalits tend to be butchers. A lot of Muslims practice butchery, but even there is systemic competition and the exclusion of one another. This so-called Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, as we call it, the melding of minds, this only exists in the mind of poets and people who confuse literature and poetry with reality. We claim they're exaggerated. Why is it still such an important thing in the memories of the Sikh, in the Sikh texts and of the Hindus themselves? This is a man who presided over an extremely brutal torture execution of Sambhaji, of Sikh gurus and things like that. All the accounts of him tally on this particular score. He was a particularly nasty man who took a great deal, well, it doesn't say great deal of pleasure, but certainly had a systemic way of horrifically torturing and killing people. Now, you can only manufacture so much atrocity literature, after which obvious contradictions emerge. The problem here is there are no contradictions. The Hindu sources, the Maratha sources, the Sikh sources all seem to agree on this one man, that he wasn't a pleasant chap. He wasn't a kind person. Now, they will give you examples of how he gave money for a temple, about how he was friends with this one Hindu king, or maybe 5-10 Hindu kings. He had Hindu blood in him after all, because on the matrilineal side he was partially Rajput. But this is like saying, Hitler was not anti-Semitic at all. He wasn't anti-Jewish at all, because there were about almost 1,000 to 3,000 Jews who he knew were Jews, changed the laws for them. His own goddaughter was half Jewish. She started getting hidden from the public view, but he knew she was Jewish. He never abandoned her. There was an air marshal of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force at the time, who was half Jewish, never abandoned, never removed. It was papered over. So there were something like between almost 3,000 people serving with the Wehrmacht or close to him, who were Jews who were never touched. They were actual Jewish members of the Finnish army who won the Maltese Cross, the cross that German officers used to wear for valor, on the Iron Cross on their neck. So, does that mean Hitler was pro-Jewish? No. These are exceptions that prove the rule. So it never existed back then, and it certainly doesn't exist now. We lead separate existences. We inhabit different spaces, not just different mind spaces, but also different public spaces. There are very few places in Delhi, largely because of urban density, that they're forced together. But even in Delhi, you will have ghettos like Selampur or Okhla or Nizamuddin, which are essentially religious ghettos. They also inhabit different spaces otherwise, so Dalits tend to be butchers. A lot of Muslims practice butchery, but even there is systemic competition and the exclusion of one another. This so-called Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, as we call it, the melding of minds, this only exists in the mind of poets and people who confuse literature and poetry with reality. That isn't the case. It was always separate. It remains separate to this day. And there is no measure of secularism by which Aurangzeb could be considered secular or even a modern person. This was essentially a semi-barbarous medieval ruler who was an anachronism even in his own time. No, not at all. This is like the German air marshal and Hitler's goddaughter who were half Jews. Just because he protected them from the gas chambers and protected the air marshal from the gas chambers, gave iron crosses, the Valor Medal to Finnish Jewish officers, who all refused, by the way, to accept it, doesn't make Hitler a pro-Semite in any form or way. So, there are these individual exceptions, which incidentally are never mentioned in his own book about himself. His own self-description, the Alamgiri, is, not self-description, but the only approved, the authorized biography, is full of a man who seems consumed by bloodlust, bigotry and hate, and takes great pride in that bigotry and hate. We don't have to trust other people, but we certainly need to trust what Aurangzeb's own self-image was.